Hello guys, this is Kentucky from Looking for Guides, and today it is time for the Frost Decay. It received almost zero gameplay-wise changes, but it received several changes due to the spellbook and the talent section, and there are much more talent options right now than before, so let's take a look on the spellbook first. Death Grip have been slightly buffed. It is now for a 10 more yard range. Death Strike heals for 15% more, which is a great thing. Death's Advance is our new movement speed option. Since Raised Folk baseline is removed, it is of course also available as a talent. But now we will use Death's Advance, which is a 30% movement speed increase for 8 seconds. During that you cannot be slowed below 100% of normal speed, and you are immune to forced movement speed effects, for example knockbacks. And passively cannot be slowed below 70% of normal speed at any times. In power, rule weapon has been received a rework. It is now on a 1 minute less cooldown, which is huge. And it grants strength and generating 1 rune and 5 runic power instantly, and the same amount every 5 seconds for 20 seconds, which is great because we now will receive our runes and runic powers in a more staggered fashion than in Legion, because in Legion we just received these runes and runic powers instantly, and we didn't have the time to just not overcap with rune or runic powers with that style. So it is a huge quality of life improvement for Frost Decays. Frost Strike is now on a melee range only. It's not ranged for 13 yards, so this makes Holding Blast our only ranged option. Icebound Fortitude have been buffed by 10%, so that's basically a great change. It increases our survivability. Pillars of Frost is now on a 45-second cooldown, which is a minus 15 second, which is great, but it is on a it grants us 5% less strength, so that's a shame. Basically, Rise Ally, just as any other DK spec, now costs 30 runic power, which is not so great, but we can't do anything about it. Remorseless Winter's slow has been reduced by 30%, just as each and every spec in the game. The baseline slow is just nerfed. Nothing else have to be said about it. The Rune of Resurrection Ancient is just nerfed by 2%. I don't think anyone will notice it. Darksucker has been reworked slightly. It now doesn't increase the healing from Death Strike. Instead, it makes your Death Strike within 20 seconds after killing an enemy that heals experience or honor to be free, and it will heal for an additional 10% of your maximum HP. Moving on, the last change is the Runic Empowerment slight nerf. It is, as I remember, 0.33% chance nerf, so it's not really an issue. I don't think anyone will notice it. Moving on to the talent section, there are 3 possible talent setups, which is a single target sustain, single target burst, and AoE. Of course, AoE wise you can also choose between burst and sustain, but I'm pretty sure you will choose the sustain version because it's much more reliable than the burst, and if you don't choose the sustain option for AoE, then you don't really do huge AoE damage. So let's start with the first row. It's Inroxable Assault, Icy Talons, and Cold Heart. Cold Heart is basically our Legion legendary, which is great for burst single target DPS. It stacks a Cold Heart buff on you, which increases the damage done by your next Chains of Ice. And it stacks up to 20 times, so every 40 seconds you will be able to just cast a huge Chains of Ice damage. It's great for burst, and that is the only situation when you should use it. Icy Talons is just a flat out attack speed increase, 15% at all times, because you will receive 1 stack of 5% attack speed increase every time you use a runic power spending ability. So basically it's always on. and Inexorable Assault is just flat out too weak to be considered as a reasonable source of DPS or reasonable talent, because you gain Inexorable Assault every 8 seconds, which makes Obliterate consume a stack to deal an additional frost damage, which is like 20 frost damage per second if you count it, which is just bullshit. So basically it doesn't ever reverse taking. So you should take Icy Talon's baseline, or sometimes for burst single target Cold Heart. The next tier is Runic Attenuation, Murderous Efficiency, and Horn of Winter. Murderous Efficiency is a random proc that you get from a other random proc. So it basically doesn't really worth choosing because it's too much of a random spell. Consuming Killing Machine proc have a 50% chance to grant you 1 rune. It's not even that good. Runic Attenuation does great synergy with Icy Talons, because auto attacks have a chance to generate 3 runic powers, and with Icy Talons you have more auto attacks with the increased attack speed. So these two talents have great synergy, and you should always use, almost always use these two in pair. Except if you use Horn of Winter, which generally generates more runes and more runic power than the other two talents, but you have to push it every 45 seconds or every time when you are well prepared for it with the Breath of Sintergosa style of play. So basically Horn of Winter is a great spell. It's much better than the other two options, but if you choose Icy Talons and if you want some sustained DPS, then you should choose Runic Attenuation. The next tier is Death's Reach, Asphyxiate, and Blinding Sleet. Death's Reach is the cooldown, sorry, not cooldown reduction, is the cooldown reset when you kill a target that yields experience on honor for your Death Grip, and of course increases Death Grip's range by additional 10 yards. I don't think you will use it outside of leveling. You will use the single target Sun Asphyxiate or the AoE Disorient, the Blinding Sleet, basically. The next tier is Avalanche, Frozen Pulse, and Frost Scythe. Avalanche causes your Howling Blast with Rime procs to cause an AoE damage, basically, and it's just also too random to be useful, and it just does damage, does reasonable damage for only targets that are like there are very lot of targets with very low HP. Then this is good. But in any other AoE situations, or basically in any AoE situations, Frost Scythe is just way better than Avalanche. So you should use Frost Strike in almost every AoE situations. It will directly replace your Obliterate, because you will cast Frost Strike all the times in AoE situations instead of Obliterate, because it will cleave in front of you for a small amount of damage, but it makes your critical strike your most important stat, because critical strikes from Frost Scythe will deal 4 times of normal damage, and of course with the Ice Cap talent critical strikes will reduce the remaining cooldown on Pillar of Frost. So basically crit is a very important stat for the Frost DK, because of Frost Scythe mainly. And Frozen Pulse should be used in single target rotation, because whenever you have lesser than 3 full runes, your auto attacks will radiate intense cold, inflicting small amount of damage on all nearby enemies. It also has a great synergy with Icy Talons because of the increased amount of melee attacks. So basically that is great for single target, and Frost Scythe is great for AoE purposes. Moving on, the next row is the defensive / movement speed increase roll, because Permafrost makes your auto attack damage grants you an absorption shield equal to 40% of the damage dealt, which is also in great synergy with Frozen Pulse and Ice Talons, which generates you a huge frost shield, of course. Wristwalk should be taken if you need extended movement options, because it grants you a 70% increase in movement speed for 4 seconds. And while this is active, your movement speed cannot be reduced below 170% movement speed, which is an awesome thing. That pact should be used when there is a huge damage spike which you will need to heal over. So for bursty incoming damage, you should use Death Pact, and for any other situation, unless you need the movement speed, you should use Permafrost. The utmost tier is Gathering Storm, Glacial Advance, and Frostworm's Fury. These all three talents are usable. They deal both respective amounts of damage, but they are used on each and other on other purposes. For example, Gathering Storm should be used in every single target sustain damaging situation, because each rune you spend increases the Remorseless Winter's damage and the duration, which is a great thing. Glacial Advance is a AoE damage basically, which applies Raise Rise to enemies near their eruption points, which is just increases your total AoE damage. Basically, this replaces the Frost Strike in your AoE rotation. Of course, Frostbite will replace your Obliterate in AoE rotation, so basically these two are just working together very well. And Frostworm's Fury should be used in every single burst situations, single target and AoE as well, because it deals a huge amounts of damage and applies a slow to every target it hits. Basically, it's the artifact ability when you just summon a dragon that runs through the whole playfield. Moving on to the last tier, we have Ice Cap, Obliteration, and Breath of Sindragosa. Since Breath of Sindragosa is the only target, is the only talent with extended AoE damage, then you should choose it every time for AoE. And if you choose Breath of Cindy, you should choose Glacial Advance and Frostbite and Horn of Winter to increase the duration of Breath of Sindragosa as far as you can. Obliteration should be used for burst single target, because while Pillar of Frost is active, Frost Strike and Howling Blast will always grant Killing Machine proc and have a 40% chance to generate a rune, which is great, so it is passively the best for burst single target. And Ice Cap should be used for single target because it grants you much more access to your Pillar of Frost cooldown, because critical strikes from Frost Strike and Obliterate will reduce the remaining cooldown of Pillar of Frost. So basically, let's see this sustain single target stuff. As you can see here, you will just apply your Frost Fever and always use all the runes possible, because that's why your Frozen Pulse will be active all the time, which deals the respective amounts of damage. So always try to empty out at least 4 of your runes, so this way Frozen Pulse will always be active on you. Basically that's it. And of course, cast as many Frost Strikes as possible to have more uptime on Icy Talons. Basically that's it. As you can see here, our melee does the most damage, then Obliterate, and of course the others are just in line with each other. Maybe Remorseless Winter is slightly weaker, but it might be because I didn't push it too often. So let's see the AoE rotation with this kind of setup with Horn of Winter. So just replace the talents fast, the skills on the skill bar, sorry. Basically it works the way that at first you will have to just generate as many runic power as possible to have a very lot of runic power available for Breath of Sindragosa. So basically we are at almost maximum runic power. We're just waiting some runes to regenerate, and now just Breath, Pillar of Frost, and generate as many runic power as possible. And if you're afraid of running out of runic power, you should use your Horn of Winter to generate instantly, and of course try to last as long as possible. If Breath of Sindragosa is exhausted, then use Glacial Advance to just empty out your runic power, to just consume runic power. And if there is too many runic power and you cannot consume all, which I don't think will happen ever, with this rotation, then you should just use 1 or 2 Frost Strikes to just get rid of the excess runic power. Basically, this is the AoE rotation. I think it's really fluid. I think it is really good. I think it is really good feeling to play with this. It is much better working than in a Legion. So that was basically the AoE rotation. As you can see, Frost Strike deals the most damage. Breath of Syndragosa also deals a huge amount of damage, as well as Glacial Advance. We cannot use these two at the same time because of course, the runic power consumption numbers. But as you can see, while Breath of Syndragosa is off of cooldown, then you will just do the same or even more damage with Glacial Advance, which is a great thing. So you can just sustainably deal huge amounts of AoE damage. But moving on to the burst single target, which is Fastworm's Fury, which is really important. Just to change back our spells in the bar. Of course, we will have a macro, or at least something in the live version which will automatically change the Frostbite and Glacial Advance when needed. So, moving on to this, we will need Runic Attenuate. No, we will need Horn of Winter and Cold Heart. And of course Frozen Pulse and Obliteration. Okay, so this will be the burst single target. So at first we will have to wait and stack up some Cold Hearts. 8, 9, just reset, I said. 13, 14, 15, it will be enough. So basically the burst rotation is just use as many runes as you can, then activate Pillar, then activate your rune weapon, then breath, then anything you have, and use as many obliterates as possible, and then use the procs. Basically that is the burst rotation. Just use as many as you can, and then at the end use your Chains of Ice, or at the beginning whenever you need it and it is at 20 stacks, just use it and it will do a huge amount of burst damage to the target. Basically that was the burst. As you can see, melee and the Frostbat from Breath of Syndragosa did huge amounts of damage, and the other spells you can see here the relative numbers. So basically you have many ways to play a Frost DK in Battle for Azeroth. I hope you will enjoy it. I think it is in a pretty good place right now. It will depend on the numbers, if it will be a good DPS or not. Personally, I think it will be a great class to play, and I hope you will also enjoy it. And see you in the next and last video, which will be the Unholy DK. See you later, bye bye!